So here we are in the home of Nelson Mandela. He came here after 28 years at Robben Island, and Sarah and I are privileged to
sit in his
living room,
chairs.
sitting in his chairs.
After hearing the most incredible story told by our friend Manfred.
Who should absolutely write the book.
And this is a privilege we will never exist again, is to sit in his chairs.
Absolutely.
Welcome to Drakenstein Victimsdale Prison.
Thank you.
How many employees here?
We have 800. 800.
And how many prisoners?
Just over 2,000. Now it sounds fantastic. Before you, I must tell you, a lot of us are not working at center level. Mandela was too keen to get involved. Come court day, there were all the clothing that were allegedly stolen. He simply took a pencil, went through the stuff, then he lifted up one of the panties, the underwear of what was there, and he showed it to this white lady. He said, "Ma'am, can you confidently convince this court that this piece of underwear indeed belongs to you?" And very embarrassedly, this lady responded, "No, sir, please," you know. And by then, the magistrate was so cross. It was a waste of his time. Also, he had no other option but to acquit the accused. But perhaps not to tell you much about Winnie, but when I do tell you the following, I don't attempt at all to be controversial, really. I just want to state the record. Winnie was really the love of his life. Spent many a day herself in prison, and whilst in prison, some ugly things happened to Winnie. Sadly, it was reported she also became involved with some dodgy stuff. You know, the Mandela soccer club, people that were allegedly murdered with a tie around their neck at the time. There was cameras, listening devices, so everything happened from here. This was the operational room. Mr. Mandela stayed alone in that house for 1 year, 4 months or 16 months. President P.W. Botha had a stroke, and F.W. de Klerk took over. Both F.W. and P.W. never came here. Staff members and the residents that side had no idea that Madiba was detained here. And the staff members who work with him, who were allowed to work with him, were all obviously handpicked, the elite, all Afrikaans speaking, all white males. Jack Swart became the cook or the chef of Madiba at this house. But before he became the cook, way back at Robben Island as a young official, his job was simply to drive the lorry between the prison and the quarry. And his instructions were, drive as reckless as you can in order to hurt them at the back. He told me, said, "Manfred, I aimed for the speed bumps. You know, they fell from the one side to the other side." He said, one day they drove so recklessly, Mr. Mandela, sitting at the back, knocked on the window, told me, "Can't you drive better? We're not pack of corn." Jack said, I just glanced at him and kept on driving. Years later, 1988, the prison commander brought Jack Swart and introduced him here to Mr. Mandela and said, "This will be your cook." Madiba started to laugh. They asked, "Why are you laughing?" He looked at this man, he said, "Officer, I hope you will be a better cook than you were a driver." Jack said to me, he said, "I could not believe that he recognized my face. And also I thought, surely he will get me back. Because we really ill-treated the man." On the contrary, you know, with that 16 months, they became like this. A week before Madiba walked out of this house, he approached Jack Swart. So, "Officer, I don't know what will happen now. But one day, if I'm lucky enough to become president of this beautiful country, I would love that you and your wife share that special moment with me." Well, 10 May 94 came. He was inaugurated as our first democratic elected president. Jack Swart and his wife was there in Pretoria amongst all those dignitaries. You know, President Clinton and all those people were there. Jack Swart was a warrant officer when he left here. He came back as a lieutenant. Today, Uncle Jack is in retirement. But personally, in my short lifetime, I never came across a guy more humble than Jack Swart. He's a stubborn guy. Education was his lowest priority. So standard 6, which is very low, was actually, as I said, too high to come by, you know. But somehow this guy found favor in the eyes of the minister and the commissioner. Whenever there was an important message for Mr. Mandela, they would tell Christo he need to relay it. And having to work so closely with Christo, Madiba became aware about his educational problem. So as a father, as we know him by now, constantly motivating this guy. Study, study, study. Each time this guy will say, "Hey, back up. You know, you don't tell me anything about education." Mr. Mandela was not satisfied. A few years later, he wrote a letter, smuggled it out to Christo's wife whilst at Robben Island, where he asked her, "Please persuade your husband to study. Because in years to come, he will need it. He did not, or he don't want to listen to me. Maybe he will listen to you." Well, the following morning, Christo could hardly wait to report for duty. After reported for duty, he went to the cell of Nelson Mandela and told him, "This is your final warning. Anything more about my education, you will see what will happen to you." Mr. Mandela didn't decide this is a lost case, you know. He didn't bother him for the next 3-4 years. 4 years later, one Sunday afternoon, this man walked with his little boy Rian, 3 years old, there on Robben Island, family time. And out of the blue, the then Minister Kubi Kutsia sent an urgent message. Go to Nelson Mandela and give him this message now. There was no time for Christo to take his boy home. He said, 3 years old, he cannot divulge anything, I will take my chance. So he decided to take the boy with. The moment Madiba saw this boy, he said, officer, I don't know if I will ever get out of this place. And if I'm outside, where indeed I will be alive. And if I'm alive, where I will be able to afford it. But if that is the case one day, please allow me to pay for your boy's education because you don't want to make use of it. And just to get rid of the old man, Christo agreed because, hey, it will never happen. Well, 1995, Christo received a famous phone call. The president of our country on the line. He said, according to my calculations, your boy Rian must now be in grade 12. I'm outside, I'm alive, and I can now afford it. Please let me honor what I promised. Christo, of course, was over the moon. He invited Madiba to his house that morning. Madiba went. The boy was at school. So Christo, his wife, and Mr. Mandela decided this boy must study engineering overseas. He was quite bright. Well, they waited. The afternoon the boy returned from school. They informed him. Said, thank you, sir, but no. I would love to become a diver. Madiba laughed. He said, no problem, my boy. At least let me pay for your diving course. And for 2 years out of his salary, he paid for the diving course of that boy. Sadly, a year later, the boy died in a car accident. The first person at that funeral, if you could get it by now, Nelson Mandela. And this lemon tree was planted by Madiba himself. Now, I have this wonderful story that I tell people about one of my favorite songs called Just Another Lemon Tree by Fool's Garden. Now, if you really listen to the words of the song, essentially the singer tried to convince his friend to look beyond the lemon tree and see the blue, blue skies. But his friend is replying, all I see is just another lemon tree. He was unable to look beyond the obvious. Now the Mandela story is exactly that. You might or you might not be aware that at the time when he came here, the ANC, his own colleagues, his own people, many Africans, they thought he have sold them out. They told him, you don't have a mandate to talk to white people. Our decision is we will take up our arms and we will fight till the bitter end. He then said, people, don't be silly. If you truly want to change people, don't attack their brains. He said attack their hearts, because once you're in their hearts, then only you can start to move the furniture, so to speak. You know, we won the Rugby World Cup in '95 in Johannesburg. But a month before that game, South Africa played the first game, the opening game against Australia in Cape Town. A week before that game, the South African national team prepared in Durbanville suburb. Mr. Mandela went to that practice ground. After the practice session, he called the captain, Francois Pienaar. He said, Francois, do me one favor, please. Whenever you play, don't play for the people on the pavilion only. Play for your nation. Francois agreed. Little did he know, a month later we won the World Cup. A British journalist came and asked him, Francois, how did this crowd of 65,000 being so noisy contribute towards your win? Francois said, today, we did not play for 65,000. We played for 43 million. Yeah.
How old was he when he came in?
7 hours. 7
Oh, wow.
So I just want to tell you about this. The whole house was bugged. There was listening devices, cameras, except for this room, the pantry. Now, Mr. Mandela figured out, because there was a time when Jack Swart, the cook, a few occasions around, when they asked him to prepare some of the meals inside. And whenever he came inside, they told him to use this room only. And Mr. Mandela was very curious, Now you can well imagine what happened over a period of 25 years. So before he went to prison, and during the 25 years, he had no knowledge about microwave ovens. So when you walk into this house, a microwave stood here, and a Philips television in that corner. So the following day, the 10th of December, he walked through this house and said, this house has 2 TVs, referring to the microwave. Let me tell you something about this fireplace. I told you that he came here from Constantia Clinic, at the time TB and a few other problems. So initially for the first 3 weeks, they provided him with wood. He used to sit there and enjoy the heat. 3 weeks later, the prison commander came to stop this nonsense. You don't give this man wood anymore. Madiba was now shocked, disappointed, but what can he do? He need to accept it. Fortunately for him, every second Monday, the doctor came to check up on him. And when the doctor came after this incident with the commander, he told the doctor, my health is important to your government. I need the heat. Please make a plan. The doctor simply went, wrote out a prescription for Hood, gave it to the commander could not believe his eyes, the doctor prescribed Hood as medication, and that's how he beat the system. And that piece of paper is now in the Apartheid Museum, quite legible. Freedom and liberties really that we enjoy today was as a result of decisions that were made around this table.
Wow.
Even the framework of our interim constitution was conceptualized here. Madiba used to sit in that chair with all the pressure from the ANC, all the pressure from the National Party government, and it was very, very difficult, but he stood there. He stood his ground. These two paintings or artwork were done by one of our juvenile offenders. We put it up here, especially when we bring children here, try to tell them about the role of both gentlemen. That one was the official photograph when he became our president. That one was allowed to come here. Sadly, there was this propaganda campaign by government. They said we have a problem with alcohol. So what they then did, they converted this room into a bar. They stacked it to capacity and actually enticed you to drink it. Said, hopefully she will drink enough and spill the beans, but it never happened. I mean, 3 nights. He said, please give me something smaller. He came through that sliding door the first night. I must fix the curtain. Oh, it looks ugly. So,
Are these the original curtains?
that's all, man. We cannot change. This house was declared a National Heritage Site, so we are not allowed to change anything.
Oh, it is a National
Yeah.
Heritage Site?
That's correct. Let me just open it.
Oh, wow.
So 3 nights later, they relocated him. They took the bed. The headboard did not fit, so only the bed. I didn't have a chance to verify this, but I personally think, really, he did not sleep there 3 nights at all. I think the space actually, they tried to get into his head.
In the movie he
Yeah.
tried and he couldn't do it.
So the small hallway, you now see the alarm system is actually where one of the cameras used to be. In the bathroom, some 6-7 years ago, some of the bathroom tiles came loose. We tried to fix it. We found listening devices even behind the bathroom tiles. So yeah, enemy number 1 still. And many days in public he said, it was never about me. He said, it's how you respond to the needs of other people. In fact, he told me, he said, big doors hang on small hinges. If you're prepared to serve other people with clean hands and a pure heart, without expecting anything in return, he said, that door will also open to you like it did for me. 1985, whilst at Portsmouth, he had cancer, prostate cancer. So the ANC arranged with the UK, the US, Canada and France, the best doctors, all of them willing to come and do this operation. The person said, hang on, we also have a doctor that can do it, but this doctor was white, Dr. Loubser. You know, the guy said, we don't trust that man. They went to Madiba, he must choose. Supposedly one of those overseas-based doctors. He simply turned to Dr. Loubser and said, I want him to do it.
I would be so scared if I were Dr.
Exactly.
Loubser.
You know, very scared. Needless to tell you today, it was a great success. 1996, the South African Rugby Board took Madiba to court. Again, we said, look at the arrogance of these people. How can they take the president to court for rugby? I mean, Madiba said, why not? I'm not above the law. Let me go. So we went. 3 times that day, the judge asked him, Mr. President, can you please sit down? After the 3rd time, he asked the judge, do you normally ask the people who stand here to sit down? He said, no. He said, please don't treat me differently. When he turned 92, George Bizos, the attorney of old and good friend of Madiba, brought him some gifts. Madiba said, thank you, George. I know you mean well, but I don't want this. If you want to do something for me, build a school. And if you're rich enough, build a school and a clinic. That's the best gift. That Invictus movie, there's a part in that movie that really excited me when I looked at it the first time. African lady, advisor to Madiba, she posed a question. She said, Madiba, why do you want to alienate yourself from your people, your cabinet, for rugby? She said, is this a political calculation? He shook his head and smiled and said, no, my dear, this is a human calculation. When he turned 90, 2008, I will never forget that day. On national television, ordinary South Africans were interviewed. One question, what is your wish or gift for Madiba on his 90th birthday? Everybody said something across the Rainbow Nation. The day when I looked, and I thank God for that, they interviewed a 9-year-old white girl. Same question, what is your wish or gift for Madiba on his 90th birthday? This 9-year-old looked straight into the camera. She said, I just want to give back the 27 years that he spent in prison. You know, that day I actually cried. My wife was released 11 o'clock in the morning. He woke out between 3 and 4 o'clock in the afternoon. The big reason for that was that morning when he came from Joburg. Before she boarded the plane, she realized one of her so-called enemies was on the same flight. So she refused to travel with this plane. Eventually she came here late. When they arrived here, she together with 14 more people were the only people allowed to drive down to come inside. When they came here, they discussed, 2 hours later, because all of them said your first speech must be in Soweto, in Johannesburg. 2 hours later he said to them, if I have a choice, I would love to make my first speech in Cape Town. You know, they all agreed. One of our former ministers, the late Dala Oma, donated a fleet of cars, and one of those cars or vehicles was a Toyota Cressida. They gave a key to a guy called Ron Sonto, and the co-driver Whitey Jacobs, and the third person in that car was Winnie Mandela. That car came and he parked here in front of a very important gate here at the rear. We call it Freedom Gate. The last official prison gate that he walked through after almost 10,000 days in prison. Walked through, not even sure whether this was a plot. No, not even sure whether this was for real. Walked through, Winnie followed in the car, and from here they drove. 15 yards before our exit gate he stopped, and I told you why. But before he stopped, he then realized he forgot his glasses and his speech in this house. Now he knew Trevor Manuel, one of our current ministers, had a copy of his speech, but he needed his glasses because way back at Robben Island, working in the Guari, the direct sunlight and the alarm affected his eyesight. So we asked the officials, can you please return, I need this. They almost simultaneously looked on their watches and told him, don't waste our time anymore. You're supposed to be out a long time ago. So we asked the two drivers, they did not have any, he accepted that. Got out, people galore in the streets, under road signs, everywhere. The police could not even escort them the normal route, Paul N1. So they need to go the other way, the same route that you approached now. So Mondium, the police escorted them up to Brackenfell. Now that's midway between Paarl and Cape Town. Years later I asked the driver, did you have any firearms perhaps? He said, Manfred, in our cars, definitely no, because when we came in they thoroughly searched us. But the rest of the fleet, yes. We didn't know what to expect, we didn't know what to prepare ourselves for. Eventually, when we arrived in Cape Town, the Grand Parade, there was now between 50 and 200,000 people, some of them waiting as from 4 o'clock in the morning. Everybody wanted to have a piece of Madiba. Ron Sonto, the key driver, realized, I cannot stop here, it's too dangerous. So they used another car as a decoy, and this particular car with Madiba in was supposed to go to the back of the city wall. But all the streets were cordoned off and barricaded, and everybody in that particular car was from Johannesburg. They don't know Cape Town, and they got lost. Half an hour, there was no Mandela. And everybody there started to blame Mr. de Klerk. They said, this is a plot, he planned this. Eventually, this car ended up very far from there in Newland suburbs of all places, in front of a white couple's home. The lady looked through the curtains, called her husband, said, hey, come look, this must be Nelson Mandela's, the same car that was just on TV. She took a child in her arm, and her husband, there they went. The moment Madiba saw them approaching, he simply unwound the window. He looked at this lady, he did not greet them. He said, ma'am, can I please hold your baby? You know, given the circumstances.
I thought he was going to say, can I please borrow your glasses?
No, he said, can I please, have your baby, or hug your baby? And given the circumstances, given the fact that she knew who this man was, she agreed. She gave the child, he embraced the child, very brave. Then, by then, everybody was looking for this car. A traffic official then eventually saw the vehicle, notified the helicopter, they managed to reroute them back to the city wall. He's about to make his maiden speech, yet he don't have glasses. What now? Then, man, he borrowed the big spectacles of Winnie Mandela. So if you look at the pictures, that goggles,
I've seen
it's
that
actually
picture.
Winnie Mandela's glasses.